With more cases of anti-Semitism raised in recent days, the New South Wales Police are also promising to use special powers to stop future provocative motorcades that have been seeing pro-Palestinian protesters drive into suburbs that are home to some of Sydney's prominent Jewish communities. In Melbourne, of course, protesters have done the same in the Caulfield area, and there were protesters on the weekend posting anti-Israeli signage on shop fronts in Melbourne too. It's an ugly time in this country, and to discuss this, I'm joined by Dave Sharma, of course, who was former ambassador to Israel and also former member for Wentworth in Sydney, which has a large Jewish population. Thanks for joining us, Dave. I wrote about this in The Australian on the weekend, and we've seen high security around Jewish schools for a long time, never expecting to see it so necessary as it is now. I can't really believe that we are this divided. We have so much hate and division being shown in our suburbs in this country right now.
I agree, Chris. I mean, I've been shocked and disappointed with how some of our fellow Australians have responded to this. I know personally that, the Jewish community has never felt so under threat, has never felt so intimidated or under siege, and they certainly never thought they'd see scenes like this here in Australia, which, generally speaking, has not much of a history of anti-Semitism, generally speaking, harmonious communal relations, and the Jewish community has always been an incredibly valuable part of our Australian public and private life. They've contributed to our nation in so many ways. So to see some of the things we've seen where this community has been demonised, they've been threatened, they've been menaced, they've been harassed, they've had their religious services disrupted. School children who go to Jewish schools are afraid to go out in their school uniform. People are afraid about going to Jewish services. And this is in their own suburbs and in their own communities, Chris. In the eastern suburbs of Sydney, in Caulfield and Melbourne, it's just not acceptable.
It is absolutely not acceptable, and the fateful error was made right at the start when the New South Wales Police didn't stop Palestinian protesters going down to the Opera House, in effect hijacking an episode or an event of commemoration and solidarity with Israel, instead singing and chanting "Death to the Jews." What do governments in Victoria and New South Wales in particular have to do, and police forces, to get back on top of this stuff? Because since then, protesters seem to be emboldened with these cavalcades going into Jewish communities and the like.
Well, absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, the way that the police and law enforcement and the New South Wales government handled those Opera House protests effectively gave a green light to everything that's followed. I mean, they should have been much firmer in their condemnation. They should have prevented the protests from going ahead, and they should have made arrests and charges being laid very quickly after that. But what we've seen since is a lot of both-siderisms, if you like, people saying, well, on the one hand and on the other, and people have a right to protest. Yes, people have a right to protest, but they don't have the right to cross the line to threaten or wish death upon or seek to intimidate or harm groups of fellow Australians. And that's where I find this so problematic. I haven't seen any person who is protesting or out there speaking in solidarity with Israel or the hundreds of kidnapping victims still being held hostage. I haven't heard them utter a word of Islamophobia or hate to Australian Arab community or hate to the Australian Islamic community, and that is as it should be. They should not be doing that. But why is it on the other side that it seems to be okay that if you support the Palestinian cause, you're allowed to not only demonise Israel, but demonise a whole community of Jewish Australians who have no responsibility whatsoever for the actions of the State of Israel? I mean, that is textbook anti-Semitism right there.
It is, and they're constantly chanting Free Palestine from the river to the sea, effectively saying get rid of Israel altogether. They're outside the New South Wales Premier's office today.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free!
Yeah, now we can all understand the trauma in Palestinian communities, worrying about the war there and calling for restraint, but this goes too far, doesn't it? They're saying eliminate Israel.
Yeah, people have to understand that this chant from the river to the sea is not some, peace rally from the anti-Vietnam War protests or something from the 60s and 70s. From the river to the sea means people are calling for the extermination of the State of Israel and the eradication of the Jewish people from their homeland in Israel. Yeah, this is what Hamas's charter commits itself to. This is why it's a listed terrorist organisation, amongst other things. And if people are supporting that chant or putting it on their social media tags or, holding banners and placards with it, they're saying they want another state to be exterminated. I mean, this is, they're talking about the genocide of the Israeli people. That's what they're supporting effectively. I don't think anyone should be ever comfortable signing on to that sort of a statement.
Absolutely. I want to get your thoughts briefly to Zoe Daniel, the Teal member for Goldstein in Melbourne. Have a listen to this comment on Radio National.
The Israeli government has to adhere to international law and the rules of war, and I think in some ways has not been. If they've been targeting hospitals, and we've had this conversation
we've
before...
seen what's happening at Al-Shifa.
Yep. So if that's what's happened, that's a war crime, pure and simple. You can't bomb your way to peace. You cannot bomb your way to peace.
I mean, what is going on there? She's accusing Israel of war crimes and talking about bombing its way to peace.
Look, I think there's so many things wrong with that statement, but to take it from the start, I mean, any person in any position of responsibility, and that includes members of parliament, want to have some pretty firm evidence backing up their claims before they go around accusing another country, especially of a civilised democratic state of war crimes. There is no evidence that Israel is engaged in war crimes. In fact, there's all the evidence that points to the contrary, that they're doing exactly what you would expect a responsible state to do in adhering to the laws of armed conflict. They have not been bombing hospitals. They've been seeking to evacuate the civilian population from northern Gaza. They've been seeking to get patients out of hospitals. They've been seeking to warn local communities to evacuate. And the military operations, particularly that they've been doing around Al-Shifa Hospital, have been highly calibrated and targeted. But I'd also say this, the laws of armed conflict are pretty clear on this. If a hospital is being used for a military purpose, it loses its protected status. And we've seen Israel release footage just earlier today showing that quite clearly there is military infrastructure, tunnels, safe rooms, blast doors buried deep under Al-Shifa Hospital. That shows
I don't want to cut you off.
Being used for military
we've
purposes.
seen a lot of that evidence, and that's important. But the point here is with someone like Zoe Daniel saying this sort of stuff, it fuels the animosity towards Israel. It's irresponsible to talk like that.
Well, look, absolutely it is. And look, Penny Wong was doing the same thing on Insiders the previous week, talking about Israel and they shouldn't be striking hospitals. I mean, if there is incontrovertible evidence of war crimes being committed, yes, call it out. But we're in the fog of war right now. No one is getting independently verified sources of information. A lot of our politicians are taking their talking points from the Hamas media briefing inside Gaza. And you've got to remember that they have a particular interest in promoting a particular narrative. Indeed,
Dave. Sorry to cut it short. We've got to move on. Appreciate your time. Dave Sharma, the former ambassador to Israel, also former member for Wentworth. He's up for a Senate pre-selection for the Liberal Party now to replace the outgoing former Foreign Minister Marise Payne. Couldn't get anyone better than Dave Sharma to replace her, could you? Make a better Foreign Minister than she was, perhaps.